An gédal sias tá fircin, fóilse rohiliog, go Áras an Uachtaráin agus mahan éin, is a salma van céile saibhín, ferm fóilse ceala rohiliog. Agus tá súlam bhfuil tá cosúlaach tar is céil go bhfuil si bhfuil teanna bhos an acháid agus céimfáid meach. An fóig go bhfuil mid réala bailile an seo ná amos ceart a bhúirt the Outland focus agus Deirdre O'Connell. May I just first of all to say, I was speaking to the Lord Mayor and he has an appointment that's simply very important, but how well he spoke. And I said, and he sends all of his regards. And all of the councillors who are here, I've met a few. You're all most welcome, and to all of you who are involved in the preparation, the members of the staff of the council, the members who have been involved in the preparation and the achievement of the plant that we have just unveiled. I think that I want to say that this is Sabina's gig now, but as she said, I know she's not alone, but all of the members of the Focus family, she has always referred to them as, and those who are friends and who know Deirdre and Deirdre's family, and you are all most welcome. I just, before one other, there's another person down there, and that's John Sheehan, who is a kind of, many is the long night he spent here over the last 14 years. And indeed, very often when people are giving tours of the house and they concentrate on the ceiling, it has been one of the things about I've been so pleased about, has been the fact that since we came in here 14 years ago, that so many artists, so many people have made music here, so many people have danced, and so many people have we've had even my great friend Eugene's play even being produced and others. But turning to what it is all about, I think what we have been at in the unveiling of the plan is something that was the giving of a delayed recognition of a life and a space that gave so much to the artistic and cultural heritage of Dublin, and indeed to the spirit of Ireland itself. And I think that the unveiling was an act of gratitude, and it takes its place, as indeed the different committee in charge of this has said, along with other of the important landmarks that come together to make up our cultural memory. I also want to say that for Sabina and myself, that occasions it carries a very special resonance. Deirdre was a close and cherished friend of ours, and particularly of Sabina. And at different stages of Deirdre's journey, I remember very, very clearly how, in fact, important the relationship between Sabina and Deirdre, and I honour it. And always it was, of course, I think what Sabina would always stress, not just her work as actor and teacher and director, but I think there was something that Sabina mentioned in her own speech, and that is the transformative power of theatre. I said as something who asked me a question, it's very, very interesting to note a small little point. I think that Nelson Kelly Rixel has a new book on this, and that is around the time when people at the end of the century, 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, when they were talking about revolution and different ways to achieve it, the one thing that they all had in common was a respect for Ibsen. And because of that, too, in many cases, there's a very famous lecture in Dublin at which they were all there, including James Connolly, including all of them. They were all at it because they were interested. And it seemed to me then that after the establishment of the state, when the forms of nationalism began to get narrow in that sense, that was one of the great achievements, I'm allowing myself to this, of Focus, that it allowed the repertoire of the theatre in Europe and in the case of Doris Lessing and others, to suddenly come back. It invited, if you like, theatre audiences and citizens to the full experience of what theatre can do. And, of course, it wasn't just any ordinary sense. It was done on the work of Stanislavski. I think that Deirdre O'Connell was really, listening to Sabina describing her relationship with actors, yes, she had a generosity of spirit and a fierce artistic integrity and luminous imagination that in fact touched so many different generations. People coming through the Áras over the last 14 years would occasionally say, I remember being at the Focus, or I remember many had actually gone to their classes. I remember it's a long, long time ago since Sabina was suggested to me what an improvisational experience was, but I won't go there now. But I think that what I think is very, very much, it was her belief in the transformative force, and it wasn't really in any ways a contribution to entertainment. It was, above all else, a voyage of discovery of the self and the self's connection with the world as represented, and so on. I think that Deirdre created possibilities wherever they existed. When Deirdre founded the Stanislavski Acting Studio in April 1963 at the Pocket Theatre in Dublin's Ely Place, the first actor training studio of its kind in Ireland, she helped to open doors to new forms of artistic expression in our country. There was a lot more to it than somebody standing at the back and shouting at you, project, which I think was available elsewhere. Deirdre brought with her an understanding of the Stanislavski system as it had filtered through her study with Lee Strasberg in the Actors Studio in New York. And it was always adapted with her own intuitive sense of Irish conditions, that ability to draw out authenticity, to help her students to find inner truth, their voice, their being. And I've always been struck by those who had met who'd come through this experience of the sense of balance that they had, and what is very much important, a much abused word in this century as last, is the word sophistication, based as it is on sophos, which is wisdom and knowledge, and the fullness of experience, rather than instrumental information that can be calculated. In 1967, a second part of Deirdre's vision had been realised, and that was finding a permanent home for the Stanislavski Studio and a theatre where plays could be produced and performed for the public. It was after an enormous amount of searching and effort by studio members that a disused factory had been discovered by Declan Burke Kennedy and was thought suitable for conversion. Deirdre and Declan Burke Kennedy took out a lease and a great work began, and the empty space was transformed into where we have been, the Dublin Focus Theatre. I remember the passion with which Declan Burke Kennedy, who shared a seat we were sharing a journey to Manchester when I was there at that time, and the passion with which he spoke about this project, and he was right. The first production on the 29th of September 1967 was Doris Lessing's Play with the Tiger, and from that night on, under Deirdre's guiding genius, the Focus Theatre became, as has been described, as a space of exploration, a place that would almost over 5 decades, become a home for imagination and for daring in radiating creative energy and courage. Because you could almost always ask, where did the work come from? And there wasn't simply any better way of answering that. And Focus Theatre then was Ireland's first art house theatre. Productions included many classics from around the world by names such as Ibsen, Strindberg, Chekhov, Anouilh, Camus, Beckett, Hellman, Saroyan, Tennessee Williams, and, of course, the great Arthur Miller. And I think that it is important, as President of Ireland had to say, about when the history of theatre comes to be written, it is important many people seize on particular decades. This is why it's so important that the contribution of Deirdre O'Connell and Focus and all of the Focus family is so important. There was little less than a kind of a hostility to extending the repertoire or engaging with theatre in terms of its transformative capacity. Sabina put it very well and very, very much. Let us all be charitable and not mention the person who made the famous quote about putting too few eggs in too many baskets, but people who will all remember it. I think inventive, stylish, experimental, and daring. It entertained, certainly, but it was also suggesting a questioning and an experience, a challenge, and it provoked, and it opened possibilities, not just for the audience and the actor, but it brought them together in a reflection that might feel an engagement with the work that was before them. And that is always what is so important. Something that I must say that Sabina and I have shared, but Sabina much more than me and deeper, is a respect for performance. It is one of the most fundamental values in theories of arts and culture. Respect for the performance. It welcomed those who might have felt distance from the world of theatre, who hadn't considered theatre as their place, offering access and inclusion, and something beyond formal utopias, a vision of art as belonging to us all, and offering us opportunities and speaking of new worlds to be experienced. The work was of highest quality, and it is Deirdre's faith in the Stanislavski method that allowed actors to reach beyond mannerism or imitation, to discover the pulse of life within the role, allowing for a realism, a depth, and an honesty that had been rare. I think this was also important. I remember once having been on a radio program which was very contentious, in which somebody said after one of Brian Friel's plays in another theatre, was I entertained? You were more than entertained in all of the work that was being promoted, that was being delivered in Focus. And that impulse continued and expanded through Mary Elizabeth Burke Kennedy's experiments and Joe Devlin's explorations of the more abstract, non-naturalistic form, showing how the Focus theatre remained ever open to innovation and taking account of what suggestions were coming anew. To each phase, Focus carried, however, Deirdre's commitment to exploration and courage, and lest it be lost, this also was extremely disciplined. And all of you there will know from the Focus family, you knew when you were ready. And I think as well, Focus belonged to the people. It was never simply commercial, and it survived not by profit, but by passion. And when the people in different stages of life would often, far before the last 14 years, they would say, I remember being at Focus, and they would describe it as a transformative experience. And when it went dark in 2012, after a gallant 50-year creative struggle against a landscape that often offered little institutional support, it felt as though an important navigational light had gone out, a light that had, for so long, pointed Irish theatre in new and daring directions. And to them, Shams, allow me only to say something else. This is something that must change because, as I'm speaking to you now, we have really lost theatre in the Irish language. And as well as that, I do recall when I was much young, more than 50 years ago, suggesting a grant, for example, for Drood in Galway. The grant was £250. And I think in a way, it is, in a way, a powerful reminder to us all to protect theatre and make theatre possible, particularly of the standard that was provided by Deirdre O'Connell and her Focus family. And I think, as well as that, the life does continue because it's in every single person who had the experience. and it shimmers in the memories of those who performed there, and to the many artists who drew and continue to draw inspiration from its spirit. You'll have heard John Bergen say how, in fact, actually, it made some decisions for her, and of course the whole world is grateful for what she achieved through excellence. It, I think, above all, represents something quite precious about the Irish artistic temperament. It reminds us that art need not be exclusive nor dependent on extravagance, but may thrive and flourish instead through cooperation and commitment on shared purpose, on that deep belief of what is possible when imagination and endeavour unite. Indeed, the challenge that continues is one of that great contradiction between what is competitive and what is cooperative, and also of a life beyond instrumentation and individuation and simple, limited forms of consumed experience, rather than an engagement with the entire beating pulse of the world. I think that it is that through that small theatre at Pembroke Place, so men have carried forward a spark that was kindled by Deirdre, teaching each embodying her belief in honesty of the performance, dedication, and something very important, respect for the craft. Today's plaque that the Lord Mayor and Sabina unveiled, it's more than just a marker of a place. It's a symbol of continuity, a reminder of what was attempted to be achieved, was achieved, can be achieved, will be achieved, when art is pursued, not for prestige or profit, but for the really benefit of our collective life. Its prophetic role. So, Marfocalscare, let us all remember then Deirdre warmly, as artist and teacher, as visionary and friend of so many of you, and see how her life's contribution remains for Ireland and generations to come, an enduring gift, one that has enriched already the cultural and artistic life of our nation and has strengthened the bonds of community, but retains such capacity. And let us remember then the Focus Theatre as that space where all that courage met creativity, and the Sunday nights when the play was discussed, and the Sunday nights when contemporary issues were discussed, including feminism, forms of nationalism, internationalism. I remember the discussions against apartheid and whatever. It was a time and a space where actors and audiences alike were invited to risk finding and expressing authenticity, and where something truly transformative took form in that small building on Pembroke Place. So may Deirdre's legacy continue to inspire all those who believe as I have in the capacity of theatre and the arts more broadly to help us understand ourselves and each other, a community of vulnerabilities as well as of achievements. Discover each other more compassionately, more truthfully. Is Gwyn Gograch agus banach darif, dan tá cuig ganach gneud in olives, then seal. I so wish you all health and enjoyment and fulfillment in your lives together. And Mila Buikas of Valence and Trona, Sabina and I are so pleased that you're all able to join us this afternoon for such a special occasion. Mila Buikas, bye-bye.